Devendra Nair was known as a scholar, a gentleman, and the beloved 60-year-old principal of St. Matthew's Women's College. Ria Varghese was a bright, fearless literature student with a habit of asking too many questions. When Ria vanished overnight without a word, without a trace, what followed was the unraveling of a decades-long nightmare hidden behind the polished doors of the college. No one expected the smiling principal to be at the center of it all, but the truth was darker than anyone imagined, and once it began to surface, there was no stopping it. For over 3 decades, St. Matthew's Women's College stood as a symbol of academic prestige and moral discipline in the quiet, fog-draped hills of Munnar. It wasn't just the ivy-covered walls or the sprawling campus that gave the institution its reputation, it was Principal Devendra Nair. To many, he was the backbone of the college. Always punctual, meticulously dressed, and impossibly polite, Nair had become a local legend. Parents trusted him with their daughters without hesitation. Students admired him for his calm demeanor and philosophical speeches. The staff saw him as a perfectionist who kept the college running like a sacred machine. He was known to sit quietly in the front row at every cultural event, applauding with controlled enthusiasm. Every morning at 7:30 sharp, he walked the campus with a steaming cup of black tea in hand, nodding at students and staff. There were stories of him personally paying fees for struggling students, writing recommendation letters that secured scholarships abroad, and offering one-on-one counseling to girls going through mental health crises. He was, in every sense, a role model, a mentor, a father figure, but no one ever asked why he never married, why he never let anyone into his personal quarters. Why his office lights stayed on long after everyone had gone home. The principal's residence, attached to the main administrative block, was always locked from the inside past 9 p.m. Occasionally, a delivery boy would be spotted entering with unmarked parcels, always late at night, and always instructed to leave without saying a word. The guards never questioned it. Who would dare question him? Some students, the more observant ones, first-year girls who got unusually close to the principal in the beginning of the semester, would later grow withdrawn. Some transferred quietly, without fanfare. Others became unrecognizable, silent, anxious, and desperate to be invisible. But their stories never came to light. After all, they had no proof, and in a place like St. Matthew's, reputation was everything. Any accusations would be crushed under the weight of Nair's spotless record and the college's public image. There was one particularly strange tradition that went unquestioned for years. Every September, the principal hand-picked 5 students for what he called the Leadership Advancement Program. The selected girls were promised access to exclusive mentoring, external academic workshops, and priority in foreign exchange programs. It sounded like a dream, but the reality was far more unsettling. None of the students who had gone through the program ever spoke about it afterward. Some didn't even return the next semester. Others avoided the principal entirely after their so-called mentorship ended. Whispers circulated about secret late-night meetings, favors being demanded, and inexplicable punishments when students tried to back out. Still, nothing stuck. The man was untouchable. He chaired educational boards, advised government bodies, and even received a civilian award for his contribution to women's education. The higher his status rose, the deeper the silence surrounding him became. There was a single, unexplained event in 2013 that might have broken that silence. A promising final-year student named Nisha D'Souza disappeared just weeks before her final exams. Her parents were told she had dropped out voluntarily due to mental health issues. The college issued no statement, no farewell, no inquiry. Her friends were discouraged from asking questions. Her belongings were cleared out of the hostel by staff, and no one saw her again. The case never made it to the police. Within months, it was as if Nisha had never existed. Years passed, and the story faded into shadows. But the truth has a strange way of resurfacing, quietly, like a ripple in still water, until it becomes a storm, and all storms begin with a secret waiting to be uncovered. Priya Menon was just an intern, fresh out of college, and eager to prove herself in the administrative office of St. Matthew's Women's College. Assigned to assist with digitizing old student records, she was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the archives room, surrounded by dust-covered cabinets and the faint smell of mold. Most of the files hadn't been touched in years, some even decades. Faded handwriting, rusted paper clips, and brittle documents were all part of the job. She didn't mind it. In fact, Priya enjoyed the quiet. But that peace would not last. It was on her third week that she opened a rusted cabinet labeled "Withdrawn Students, Confidential." Inside were dozens of yellowing folders, all tagged with years scribbled in red ink. Most were ordinary students who had left for personal reasons, transfers, or early marriages. But one folder caught her attention. The tab was torn, the year smudged, and the name written in faint pencil, Nisha D'Souza. It rang a bell. Priya paused, trying to recall where she had heard the name. Somewhere in the college's digital alumni registry, she remembered not seeing it, despite records existing from that batch. She opened the folder slowly. Inside were only a few sheets. Unlike other files, this one was incomplete. There was no transfer certificate, no medical reports, no formal letter from parents, and, most oddly, no official stamps. Just a single-page withdrawal note, shaky and poorly written, stating that Nisha was leaving due to personal mental distress and academic pressure. It didn't sound like the confident top-ranking student Priya had read about in archived magazines from the college library. Her curiosity deepened when she noticed that the student ID number on the form didn't match the ones from that year. It was off by 2 digits, almost like a fabricated entry. Disturbed, Priya took a photo of the file with her phone. She thought it might just be an error, a lost document that needed correction. She decided to ask Mr. Joseph, the admin officer in charge. A mild-mannered man in his 50s, Joseph had been working at the college almost as long as the principal himself. When she brought up the folder, his face changed, his usual tired eyes sharpened, and his hands stiffened as he took the file from her without speaking. "Don't worry about this one," he said abruptly, sliding it under his desk. "Just old paperwork. Some students leave without formalities. Focus on the newer files. That's where the digitization matters." The response was too quick, too rehearsed. Priya felt it instantly. Later that evening, something bothered her. She went back to the cabinet to double-check the file. It was gone, not misfiled, gone entirely. She checked all the adjacent drawers, searched for mislabeling, but it had simply vanished. It hadn't even been 24 hours. When she went to check the office CCTV footage, hoping to retrace who last accessed the room, she found that the system had been disabled. The screen showed a maintenance alert, time tagged just 2 hours after she had seen the file. That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of Nisha's file kept flashing in her mind. The shaky handwriting, the wrong ID number, the missing stamps. She tried searching for Nisha online, on alumni websites, social media, anything, but there was nothing. It was as if she had been erased. Priya didn't tell anyone, not yet. But she saved the photo of the file in multiple places, her cloud storage, her email drafts, even on a pen drive she kept hidden in her hostel room. Something was deeply wrong, and she felt it in her bones. She just didn't know yet how deep it went. What Priya didn't realize at the time was that finding that file wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a forgotten folder. It was bait left behind by a system that believed it had already erased every trace. But systems, no matter how controlled, leave cracks. And someone was starting to look through them. The tension in the air was almost invisible, like a thread stretched tight but unseen. For years there had been whispers among the students at St. Matthew's Women's College. Quiet, half-formed murmurs that never made it beyond the hostel corridors. Whispers about strange meetings, sudden disappearances, and the heavy, suffocating silence that followed any attempt to ask questions. No one dared speak openly, Not when the man at the center of it all was Devendra Nair, the principal who ruled with a calm, iron grip masked by polite smiles and decades of admiration. But something changed one cold November evening. A post appeared on a student-run social media page, anonymous, cryptic, and deeply unsettling. It came from a second-year literature student, someone whose name was never mentioned, but whose words burned into the minds of everyone who read them. The message was short, fragmented, but laced with fear. If you've ever been called to the principal's quarters alone, you know. If you refused, you were marked. If you obeyed, you were erased. I said no, and now he's watching me. Attached to the post were 3 grainy images. One showed a hidden camera placed behind a wall clock. Another was a screenshot of a phone's trash folder. Deleted messages with no context, just timestamps that were all around midnight. The final photo showed a dimly lit room. The furniture looked old and out of place, nothing that matched any classroom or dorm in the college. A bed, a small table, and a camera tripod barely visible in the corner. The post spread like wildfire. Students began to share their own experiences anonymously. Some claimed they'd been offered special counseling by the principal, only to be summoned alone at odd hours. Others recalled seeing girls enter his residence and leave visibly shaken. One former student, now studying abroad, commented that she had tried to speak out years ago but was threatened with expulsion. Still, no names, no proof. Just a rising wave of fear and fragments of a dark puzzle. The college administration moved quickly. The post was taken down within hours. The student-run page was suspended for violating guidelines. The deans held emergency meetings, calling it a coordinated attack to defame the college's image. But among the students, the silence only made the tension thicker. They began to notice things, like how the principal's quarters had no visitors record in the night log, or how certain students vanished from college group photos in final-year magazines. Ria, the girl behind the original post, never returned to class. Her roommates were told she had taken emergency leave for personal reasons. Her belongings were removed the next day. When her friends tried to contact her, her phone was switched off. Her social media accounts were deleted entirely within 48 hours. All that remained was a void. It was as if she had been wiped clean from the system. Yet a few had saved her post. Others began forming encrypted chat groups to talk, away from college servers. In one of those groups, a senior student mentioned something strange. 2 years ago, she'd volunteered for the principal's leadership program and was asked to sign an agreement for professional. She thought nothing of it until recently, when she found her signature on a completely different document filed under her name in the admin office, a document she never remembered signing. Then there was the janitor, who was fired without notice after he was seen loitering near the principal's quarters late at night. No one had heard from him since. It was all too much to be coincidence, and yet nothing was concrete. Everything was shadows, rumors, suspicions. No hard evidence. But fear has a way of creating momentum. What began as a whisper had now turned into a quiet storm beneath the surface. Someone had dared to speak. And though she was gone, her warning lingered in the minds of those who stayed behind. Something was hidden inside that college. Something carefully buried. But as more eyes began to look in places they were never supposed to, the illusion of safety began to crumble. The truth wasn't just waiting to be found. It was bleeding through the cracks. The turning point came not from within the college, but from outside. A persistent journalist named Ashwin Thomas, who had been following the online chatter about St. Matthew's with growing concern. Based in Kochi, Ashwin had made a name for himself exposing corruption in educational institutions. At first, the rumors about Principal Nair seemed like just another scandal waiting to fade away. But something about this story stuck with him. The pattern was too calculated. The silences too loud. Ashwin started digging. He first traced the missing student mentioned in the viral post. Ria. Her mobile number was deactivated. Her parents refused to speak, sounding nervous even over email. She had no forwarding address, no recent online activity. It was as if she had vanished entirely, just like the girl from 2013. Nisha D'Souza. Ashwin's curiosity turned into obsession. He posed as a government-appointed education audit officer and requested access to the campus for a routine inspection. With forged credentials and a confident demeanor, he walked the corridors of St. Matthew's as if he belonged there. Most staff assumed he was legitimate. Even Principal Nair greeted him briefly, offering the same mild smile that had charmed thousands. Ashwin noticed everything: the architecture of the administrative block, the surveillance blind spots, the locked door. He was particularly interested in the principal's residence, attached to the rear of the office complex. On paper, it was just a small two-room unit, but Ashwin had obtained old construction plans from the local municipal office. The original blueprint showed 3 rooms, not 2. One room had no windows, no entry point listed. A sealed chamber. He waited until late evening when the administrative wing emptied. Pretending to have lost his mobile charger, he re-entered the block with a small camera and a local locksmith on standby. The lock on the interior door leading into the principal's quarters was antique, almost ceremonial, far too secure for an average staff apartment. It took 20 minutes and total silence for the locksmith to pry it open. What Ashwin found behind the hidden wall was far beyond what he expected. The secret room was dim, heavily soundproofed, and strangely sterile. A single bed with plain white sheets, a table with a reading lamp, and mounted on one corner, almost discreet, a small black camera pointed directly at the bed. Against the wall stood a steel cabinet, and beside it, a high-end desktop computer setup, the kind used for video editing and storage. The air was stale. It smelled of chemicals and something colder, something mechanical. Ashwin opened the cabinet. Inside were dozens of labeled DVDs and external hard drives, each tagged with codes. SS_12, ND_7, RT_6. The initials matched several missing students. Some labels had dates going back more than 10 years. Others were marked with chilling words: discarded, held, cleared. He plugged one of the hard drives into the system, recording everything with his hidden camera. The files inside confirmed the worst. Video footage of private sessions with students, some of them visibly disoriented, some crying, others simply staring blankly at the floor. The scenes were silent, the audio stripped, but their expressions told enough. These were not academic meetings. These were trophies. Ashwin copied as many files as he could to a separate drive, locked the room again, and slipped away unnoticed. He had his story. He had the evidence. But the storm came faster than expected. Within 48 hours, Ashwin's apartment in Kochi was broken into. Nothing of value was taken. No money, no electronics, not even his cameras. The only item missing was his laptop and the original hard drive he had recovered from the room. It was a message, one that told him he was being watched closely, but Ashwin had been careful. He had already uploaded parts of the footage to a secure cloud. The truth had been seen, and even though the college remained silent, the illusion of safety had cracked. Someone had opened the door they were never supposed to, and now nothing could close it again. The atmosphere at St. Matthew's had shifted. What was once a campus filled with quiet ambition and youthful chatter had become a place of uneasy glances and whispered rumors. Students avoided walking alone after dark. Staff grew tense, speaking in clipped tones, avoiding eye contact whenever the principal's name came up. Everyone knew something was happening, but no one said it aloud. Ashwin Thomas's footage had leaked despite the break-in. A small independent news blog published grainy stills from the hidden room and blurred screenshots of the video footage with a vague headline about educational abuse and a hidden chamber within one of Kerala's most prestigious women's colleges. They didn't name Devendra Nair directly, but everyone who had ever walked the halls of St. Matthew's recognized the setting, the computer, the cabinet. The truth hung like smoke, thick and inescapable. And yet, the college released a formal statement denying everything. They claimed the footage was fabricated, the video manipulated, and the source unreliable. Principal Nair remained calm in public, appearing at events, giving lectures, even leading prayer at the morning assembly. But behind the scenes, he tightened his grip. Surveillance increased on campus. Phones were randomly checked under the pretense of cyberbullying prevention. Student emails were monitored. Anyone who had been vocal about the allegations found themselves cornered with disciplinary warnings, poor attendance records, or sudden academic penalties. And then came the sudden death of a faculty member. Mrs. Varsha Pillai, a history professor known for her empathy toward students, officially, it was ruled a suicide. Found in her apartment, a note by her side spoke of overwhelming guilt and the burden of silence. But some students claimed she had been asking questions days before her death, making phone calls to former students, trying to piece together details about the so-called leadership program. She had even confided in one senior that she had seen things. Files that didn't add up, student records mysteriously erased, transfer certificates with forged signatures. Her death shut down what little resistance remained on campus. Fear turned inward, but outside the college walls, something else was growing. Ashwin's leak had sparked interest among a group of former students, alumni who had long carried private scars. They began reaching out to each other, sharing old memories, screenshots, documents. One had saved a voice note she had secretly recorded during a late-night meeting with Nair, where his tone shifted from fatherly concern to veiled threat. Another had a series of emails showing how her exchange program offer was suddenly revoked after refusing a private meeting. The puzzle was coming together, but what no one expected was what they would find next. Not another student, not a file or hard drive, but a locked storage facility, rented under a false name just outside Munnar. A local who had worked as a delivery driver for the college years earlier tipped off Ashwin about it, saying he had once been asked to deliver unmarked boxes there every month. At the time, he thought it was for college supplies. Ashwin located the facility. With help from one of the alumni who was now a lawyer, they secured a court order to open the unit. Inside was silence and secrets. Thousands of boxes labeled in the same code system he had seen in the principal's hidden room. Dozens of tapes, photographs, confiscated student ID cards, even personal belongings. Lockets, journals, scarves, and pens, items that should have been returned to families but were instead locked away like souvenirs. But there was more. In the far corner was a filing cabinet containing detailed psychological assessments of students. Notes about their emotional vulnerabilities, financial situations, and disciplinary records. Cross-referenced, color-coded. It was a blueprint, a methodical system to select, manipulate, and silence targets. Every detail was chillingly calculated. What had seemed like isolated stories were now clearly part of something systematic, organized, predatory. The evidence was undeniable, but exposing it wouldn't be simple, because powerful people were involved, people who had turned their heads for years, people who would not fall quietly. At precisely 9:00 a.m., police vehicles arrived at the gates of St. Matthew's Women's College. The media wasn't far behind. Dozens of cameras, flashing lights, and reporters flooded the once quiet campus. Word had leaked overnight. Someone had tipped off a national news channel about the investigation, and suddenly the story was no longer buried in obscure blogs or whispered between hostile walls. It was national. It was public. And it couldn't be ignored anymore. Principal Devendra Nair was taken into custody under charges that included sexual exploitation, coercion, illegal surveillance, forgery, and destruction of evidence. The police escorted him out of his office calmly, without handcuffs, his face expressionless as the cameras followed every step. For a man who had ruled with such quiet dominance for nearly 3 decades, he showed no emotion, no protest, just a faint smirk that unnerved many watching. It was the expression of someone who still believed he wouldn't fall. But the evidence was overwhelming. Thanks to the cache of files found in the hidden storage facility, coupled with Ashwin Thomas's video documentation and testimonies from former students, a massive legal case was now forming. More victims were stepping forward. Some had remained silent for years out of fear or shame. Others had been forced into silence by threats or bribes. But now, with Nair exposed and his system unraveling, their voices began to rise. Still, even with the arrest, things were far from resolved. The College Board was quick to distance itself from the scandal, claiming ignorance. Internal inquiries were launched against several senior staff members who were suspected of helping cover up the abuses, either by omitting files, doctoring student records, or discouraging victims from speaking out. A few abruptly resigned. One fled the country the night before the raid. Another was found attempting to destroy documents in the basement records room. Every day brought new revelations. Bank records linked to Nair showed large, unexplained transactions over a 10-year period. Some of the payments led to shell companies traced back to fake scholarship funds. Others were allegedly bribes paid to parents or faculty to keep things quiet. More disturbingly, one transaction was linked to a private clinic outside of Ernakulam, specialized in mental rehabilitation. Investigators discovered that several girls who had gone missing from St. Matthew's were listed as patients there, though most had never shown up in person, that their files were forged, their names used to claim funding. But despite the magnitude of the operation, the most haunting part was the silence of those who had enabled it. For years, people had seen signs. Faculty who knew too much, staff who had doubts, even students who whispered warnings, all had convinced themselves it was safer to stay quiet. Some out of fear, others out of convenience. It had taken years and extraordinary courage for the truth to finally rise. Ashwin Thomas, once a lone voice, had become a reluctant hero. But even he knew this wasn't a victory. Not yet. There were powerful allies of Nair still unnamed, influential figures who had benefited from his silence, or perhaps his secrets. Some of the tapes found in the storage unit hinted at visitors outside the college, men in government cars, middle-aged professionals, businessmen. The implications were horrifying. Authorities feared that some evidence had already been destroyed, and that parts of the network extended far beyond the campus, and that the arrest of one man wouldn't dismantle an entire ecosystem of control. Still, the walls had finally cracked. For the first time in decades, students at St. Matthew's spoke freely. They shared stories without fear. They reclaimed forgotten names. Nisha D'Souza, Ria, and others erased from records. Murals were painted in their memory. Protests were held, petitions signed. What was once hidden had become a cause. But beneath the surface, one question remained unanswered. How many more places like St. Matthew's existed, where power wore the mask of protection and silence was traded like currency? No one could say for sure, but now at least, people were watching.